All right, I'm about to go to New Zealand, so if the Packers are going to make any big-time trades, it has to happen within the next 5 minutes. Grossi Posse Packer Nation. Welcome to an episode of Packcast, the podcast where you don't have to be Packers fan, but it sure does up. I'm your host, Tom. It's time to talk about the Packers post-free agency. Grossi, and today we are going to talk about the Packers post-free agency. It was a pretty quiet free agency period for the Green Bay Packers, and that was to be expected. There were some rumors that were coming from some non-validated sources that maybe there were some rumblings that they'd make a big-time trade for a defensive lineman, but as of Tuesday, March 17th, that has not occurred. That doesn't mean it can occur, as the Broncos, they just traded for Jalen Waddle, but I can't imagine the Packers are going to be making a big-time move, especially with some big contract extensions on the horizon, like Tucker Kraft, who they're going to have to re-sign, Christian Watson, and so I have to imagine the Packers are mostly done, and anybody they acquire is going to be more of a depth piece. But let's talk about the Packers, because I got a ton of messages from fans that were a bit concerned about what the Packers were doing, or more so the fact that they didn't make any big-time moves. So let's go through all these moves, and I'll give you my thoughts on what I think the Packers are doing and how they're going to be competitive heading into this season. First of all, let's talk about who the Packers re-signed. The big contract was for Sean Rhyan, who signed a 3-year, $33 million deal. And for the Packers to re-sign Sean Rhyan, I think this makes a lot of sense, as offensive line, in my opinion, is one of their higher draft needs. It's definitely a top 5 need. And the Packers already let some offensive linemen walk during this free agency period. On top of that, they brought back Nick Nyman for special teams. They brought back Chris Brooks, the running back. They brought back Darian Kennard, another offensive lineman, Christian Welch, and Brenton Cox Jr. on that defense. And so, again, there's not any big-time splashy moves. They didn't make any of these big contract extensions this offseason, but I wouldn't be surprised either later this summer or definitely next offseason, you are going to see a ton of guys get re-signed for some big-time contracts. And then taking a look at trades after the re-signings, there were only 2 trades that the Packers pulled off. It was Colby Wooden to the Colts for Zaire Franklin and Rashawn Gary to the Dallas Cowboys for a 2027 4th-round pick. And on these trades, there's one that I'm kind of like okay about, and the other I am very happy about. Colby Wooden was a guy on the defensive line that I actually liked, but it made sense trading for Zaire Franklin because, one, you get a veteran presence for that linebacker core, and on top of that, they allowed guys like Quay Walker to go and sign with the Raiders, and so the Packers definitely needed some depth there, and on top of that, you get a veteran. And then the other trade, of course, being Rashawn Gary going to the Cowboys for a 4th-round pick, not this draft, but the following draft, and I like this for a litany of reasons. You look at a guy like Elton Jenkins, who the Packers just released and let him walk away, and the Browns re-signed him almost immediately. Yeah, the Packers were going to do the same exact thing with Rashawn Gary, to the point where Rashawn Gary went on Instagram and posted early that he was thanking the fans in Green Bay for his time, but he was moving on to his next opportunity. And so why I'm happy about this is because the Cowboys basically gave us a free 4th-round pick for a guy that we were going to cut. So yeah, I'm pretty stoked about that. And the Cowboys, this was an interesting decision because, yes, they did need a pass rusher because, they traded away Micah Parsons to the Packers, but they also made Rashawn Gary take a pay cut. And the reason why I said he was going to be cut, not just because of his Instagram post, but it was because of that contract. It was not very team-friendly after getting that extension, and based on the way that Rashawn Gary played last year, it has not been great. The year before, in 2024, he had 7.5 sacks, and this past season, he started off really hot with 7.5 sacks, and you thought, okay, with Micah Parsons, things are going to get a lot better, but it didn't. He fell off a cliff. He disappeared for 9 games, and it ultimately just felt like after that major injury, Rashawn Gary was not the same. And so the fact that the Packers were able to get a 4th-round pick for a guy that they were allowing to walk, yeah, I'm okay with that. And then for the guys that the Packers lost during this free agency period, they lost Elton Jenkins, they lost Quay Walker, Malik Willis, Kingsley Enagbari went to the Jets, Romeo Doubs, he signed a big-time contract with the Patriots, Nate Hobbs, he went to the 49ers, Rasheed Walker went to the Panthers for a 1-year deal, and Emmanuel Wilson went to the Seahawks. And looking at all the guys that we lost, there's not a ton that stand out of, oh man, what are we going to do without player so-and-so this next season? Elton Jenkins at one point was my favorite offensive lineman, and I think you can make a really strong argument that he was the best offensive lineman that the Packers had. His versatility, he could play all over that offensive line. Of course, we had him playing center, but we had him playing guard at points, and it just feels like a similar situation to Rashawn Gary, that after his major injury, he just didn't play the same. On top of that, Quay Walker, this was kind of expected by everybody. This is why you went out and got a Zaire Franklin, because Quay Walker, he was going to cost too much money. He signed a big-time contract with the Raiders. I'm very happy for him. I hope he does well, but the Packers have Edgerrin Cooper in the middle, and I'm very happy about that, and now bringing in Franklin, I think they're going to be okay. Malik Willis, I'm very happy for, but there was no way that the Packers are going to be able to keep him. He signed a deal with Miami that I thought was actually a pretty solid deal for the Dolphins, but Malik Willis is back to being a starting quarterback in the NFL, and he definitely deserves a shot after the way that he's been playing in Jordan Love's absence. He's been able to go in, he's been able to operate the offense, and while yes, it's a more simplistic offense than what Jordan Love runs, it was able to make the most of opportunities and also win a lot of games. So I hope Malik Willis absolutely crushes it in Miami. Kingsley Enagbare is another guy that I just really liked on the Packers squad, but he went to the Jets for a one-year deal. I hope he does well. Romeo Doubs, he was the odd wide receiver out. They drafted Matthew Golden in the first round, and Romeo Doubs, while I love him forever and I will always scream, Romeo Doubs, the Packers were not going to pay that kind of money, especially when they're going to give a big old contract extension to Christian Watson as long as he can stay healthy. And as I mentioned before, Jaden Reed is also going to be due a contract soon, and they just drafted Matthew Golden, so they are set at wide receiver. Nate Hobbs, I had high expectations for him. We did kind of a swap with the Raiders last year. They got Eric Stokes, and we got Nate Hobbs. And Eric Stokes, he actually just signed an extension with the Raiders. Very happy for him. But Nate Hobbs, he came to the Packers, got injured, and then kind of was always injured. And this one was a little confusing for me, and not because he didn't play poorly, because he was injured and he did not play well. But after the season, Goody had some comments that said, hey, we're looking forward to Nate Hobbs being healthy and contributing, and in my opinion, corner is the number one need for the Packers. And so for him to just be let go by the Packers, I guess the organization just did not have a lot of faith in him. And again, he did not play well. On top of that, Rasheed Walker, took a little while for him to get signed, but he only signed a one-year deal with the Panthers. And Emmanuel Wilson, he was another guy who was a really nice RB2 and at times RB1 last year when Josh Jacobs was hurt. I hope he does really well at Seattle, just not against Green Bay, but I'm very happy for him, and hopefully we see Marshawn Lloyd at some point on the field. And so now looking at the players that the Packers actually acquired during free agency, the first big one was Benjamin St-Juste, the corner who was originally on the Commanders, but then went over to the Chargers. He did not play very well with the Commanders for a number of years, but he actually had his best season with LA last year. So I'm hoping that we can get that kind of performance out of him this season for the Packers, because listen, we need some damn corners. He ranked 9th in coverage last year according to PFF and ranked 12th out of 114 CBs according to PFF. So again, he had a major step last year with the right fit, and hopefully Jonathan Gannon can bring that out of him, because as I mentioned, whether he's going to be used as a depth piece or whether he's going to be used as a full-blown starter, the Packers need help in their secondary. On top of that, the Packers signed Sky Moore, which I know a lot of fans were kind of like, oh, okay, but this actually gives me a little bit of hope. After Rich Bisaccia stepped down, I was hoping that the Packers were really going to make a conscious effort with their special teams. They signed a former Patriots special teams coach, which I'm elated about, because the Patriots were one of the teams that were doing this for a very long time and actually getting key pieces specifically for the special teams. What do I mean by that? I mean, they're actually going and getting gunners, returners, and that makes a huge difference, because for the Packers, it felt like special teams was just an afterthought since, I don't know, forever.
Forever.
Because whether it was the block punt against the 49ers in the divisional round, no, I have not forgotten that, or the fact that you just had guys like Romeo Doubs returning kicks back there and not signing guys to the 53-man roster to just play special teams. Like I said, you just need more out of special teams, especially now when it matters more than ever. You look at the Seahawks and what they were able to put together. One of the many reasons they were so successful last year is not only because they had a really good defense and a good offense, but they also had a really good special teams. So the fact that they signed Sky Moore to just be a returner, I'm pretty happy about that. And then the other big acquisition that they got was Javon Hargrave on the defensive line. And I kind of have mixed thoughts about this. The pros, the Packers definitely need defensive linemen. That's another position where they need a ton of depth. And Javon Hargrave on paper, he provides that and starting opportunities. His best season was 4 years ago in 2022 when he had 11 sacks, and who was his defensive coach at the time? It was Jonathan Gannon. And so being reunited with him gives me some optimism. However, where I'm a little bit pessimistic about this signing is the fact that he signed a big-time deal with the Minnesota Vikings last year for a number of years, and they cut him after just 1 year. And so he only had 3.5 sacks last year, and he was with Brian Flores. And so you can make an argument that maybe those defensive linemen are not going to have some great success under Brian Flores because he utilizes them a little bit differently. But yeah, this just doesn't make me the most excited of, oh man, our defensive line is fixed. But I think the potential is there, and at the bare minimum, again, you're getting a depth piece at a position where you just need bodies. Let the bodies hit the floor. Let the bodies hit the... And so where does this leave the Packers after all these signings and releases and re-signings and trades and all that great, wonderful stuff? I feel like it leaves them in a similar spot to where they were at the end of the season. The pieces that they lost, like I said, I don't think are going to make a huge difference on this squad. I would say the biggest piece that they lost was probably Romeo Doubs and Malik Willis. Malik Willis just having a suitable backup that can come in and win you football games, that... oh man, that had been sorely missed for many, many years in Green Bay. I feel like we hadn't seen that since the Matt Flynn era. And Romeo Doubs, I just love how consistent he was. Yes, he dropped that onside kick attempt, and that really wasn't great, but he usually was pretty damn consistent. He had sure hands, and Jordan Love liked him, so I loved him on the offense. And again, trading for Zaire Franklin over Quay Walker. Quay Walker just priced himself out. He's young, entering the prime of his career. He had a pretty good season last year, and so I wasn't really surprised by this, but I don't think the linebacker position is going to completely fall apart now that Quay Walker is not on the squad. And so heading into the draft, which will be an entirely different video, I think the Packers' needs are about the same. They need corners, they need defensive linemen, they need to go find a backup quarterback now, and they're going to have to get some depth at O-line as well. And depending on what they do in the draft, I know they're not going to have a first-round pick. I think the Packers are still going to be contenders this year just from getting healthier. Micah Parsons will be back, Tucker Kraft is going to be back, Devontae Wyatt's going to be back.
I'll be back.
Those are some key pieces on both sides of the ball, and when we had them, the Packers were playing like Super Bowl contenders. Heading into that Denver game, they were looking really damn good before everything fell apart. And oh yeah, we get Zach Tom back too. That will be very nice. But I think the biggest problem with the Packers right now is there's a lack of depth at some of these pieces. So for example, you look at a guy like Lucas Van Ness, who was playing actually really well last season. It was his best year so far of his career, but then he got hurt. And after that, we didn't really have another pass rusher that could fill his shoes. It's the same exact thing with Devontae Wyatt. We do not have another Devontae Wyatt on this squad. It's the same thing at offensive line. If one of those key starters goes down, we're in trouble. And so overall, while not the most exciting free agency period for the Packers, I do like that they got some depth at corner and defensive line, and I think that there's some potential there. And on top of that, with all the players that the Packers lost during this free agency period, I don't think it's going to be a detriment to the team. And so overall, we'll wait and see what happens in the draft. We'll see if they are going to address the defense. I think that is the side of the ball that needs the most help, whether it's the secondary, whether it's defensive line. But yeah, I think the Packers are in good shape. Let's see what happens in April. And with my luck, yeah, they'll make a big-time trade as soon as I leave. But let me know what you think down in the comments below. You know, find me at TomGrossiComedy.com. And a big shout out and thank you to all the Patreon and YouTube members who support this channel. And thank you so much for watching. I'm Tom Grossi. And as always, go Pack Go.